It was long gone. Everyone forgot any action in Boca Chica, Texas. On Tuesday, however, something eventually happened. Well, a container with liquid nitrogen under pressure exploded. In this video, we will tell you everything about SpaceX's GSE-4 tank exploded during testing. Super heavy booster aerocovers fully installed. Number 5. SpaceX test tank explodes during nitrogen supply. A SpaceX test tank loaded with liquid nitrogen blasted after being pressurized. The blast took place at the company's facilities in Boca Chica, Texas, and was recorded by an on-site spectator. Tanks of this kind are usually utilized to test the integrity of the material that constructs them, which will ultimately be used in the building of rockets and missiles. The explosion happened in the tank called GSE-4 after being loaded with liquid nitrogen, then pressurized. With the detonation, a gigantic cloud of nitrogen was released by the site. In the video released by the officials, you can see automobiles parked near the location, along with some equipment. As the area was not vacated, it is not yet known if what occurred was accidental or if it was just a purposeful strategy in which SpaceX chose to experiment with the tank to find out how far the structure could withstand. It is worth remembering that this is not the first time something like this has happened with the company's tanks. Before 2 years, for example, an SN 7.1 tank experienced a pressurization trial and, during the procedure, was filled with liquid nitrogen at very low temperatures, not taking long to explode. The test was carried out to confirm the limitations of the setup and also to exemplify the interactions that can occur with a Starship vehicle, which will need to resist specific requirements to execute manned flights safely. Number 4. Something blew up Elon. You can breathe right away. Something finally exploded in the Starship family house, and it felt so much brighter. Who doesn't miss all the test tank explosions? The early prototype of Starship let the first one raise his hand. In recent months, too much, at least explosively, has not happened there, as SpaceX is waiting for a delayed environmental judgment from the Federal Aviation Administration. Just after receiving it, it will be possible to return to any flights, including, of course, the first shot at performance Starship's orbital flight installed on top of the Super Heavy first stage. On Tuesday, January 18th, amateur cameras of the NASA Spaceflight YouTube channel recorded the explosion of a liquid nitrogen tank. So far, Elon Musk has not commented on the eruption itself, so it is not understood whether the tank explosion was due to some test or accidentally. As commentators note, such tanks have already been intentionally yanked apart, if only to experiment with the power limits of the materials they are made of. On the other hand, there are cars and other equipment near the tank just before the blast, and the company always removes all unnecessary things from the nearest danger zone before the trial. However, as long as the president of the company, the Techno King, and the one-man PR department in the person of Elon Musk do not give remarks about the event, we only have guesses. Number 3. The facilities. This surprising explosion occurred after SpaceX's GSE-4 test tank was filled with liquid nitrogen and pressurized. The company normally utilizes these tanks to test the structural integrity of material that it'll eventually use on spacecraft. While it's still hazy whether the company planned to experiment the tank until failure, erupting violently that is, it appears like it might have been unintended. It's unlikely that they wouldn't have cleared the area if they knew it would explode. Nearby porta potties, one sharp-eyed observer noted, appear to have survived the blast. Then again, the company has blown up these test tanks intentionally before. In June 2020, it blew up a tank to test out a Starship prototype, so it could have been completely planned. Of course, eruptions are part and parcel when it comes to SpaceX. The company has a history of its rockets blowing upon its launch and landing pads. Still, it's pretty cool to see one produce massive clouds of nitrogen rather than humongous fireballs. Number 2. SpaceX fully installs Super Heavy boosters aerocovers. For the first time, SpaceX has more or less built a full set of aerocovers on a Super Heavy booster prototype. Designed to shield the booster from both itself and Earth's atmosphere during ground testing, launch, ascent, and re-entry. Super Heavy structures amount to thin steel shells mounted on metal box frames. Super Heavy will initially sport 29 Raptors, and future versions will have 32 of the engines, Musk has said. Starship's upper stage, a 165-foot tall or 50 meters spacecraft called Starship, will be powered by 6 additional Raptors. The most prominent aerocovers slot over the top of 6 racks of equipment installed on the outside of Super Heavy's aft end, giving the booster a sort of utility belt of hydraulic systems, pressure vessels, avionics, and heat exchangers. Unsurprisingly, those racks are festooned with electronics, composites, and thousands of feet of wiring and thin plumbing, none of which are particularly suited to sit a few dozen feet from the fury of 29 to 33 Raptor engines or near the leading edge of a hypersonic re-entry vehicle. Aside from the steel, they're mounted on so that every system located on Super Heavy's utility belt would start malfunctioning or be destroyed outright if directly exposed to just a few seconds of the hypersonic buffeting and heating Starship boosters will encounter during re-entry. Unlike Falcon boosters, which almost always use re-entry burns to slow down and create a sort of heat shield with their exhaust, SpaceX is theoretically designing Super Heavy to endure the full force of re-entry without an additional burn to cushion the blow. To survive re-entry and still land in good enough condition to enable anything close to same-day reusability, which is SpaceX's goal, every ounce of at-risk tools installed on Super Heavy's exterior will likely need to be carefully protected. In theory, that's the purpose of the aerocovers SpaceX has only just started to fully install, let alone test, on Super Heavy B4. Before Booster 4's most recent installation on the orbital launch mount, SpaceX did install covers over a pair of hydraulic and heat exchanger racks, but left all 4 composite overwrapped pressure vessel racks, or COPV racks, and an umbilical port uncovered. After B4 was removed from the launch mount for the 3rd time on December 30th, both covers were uninstalled. On January 14, 2022, though, SpaceX rapidly installed all 6 covers for the first time and began sealing each cover's exposed corners. On January 17th, SpaceX even installed aerodynamic surfaces around Booster 4's protruding umbilical port, smoothing out any theoretical airflow near the machine. Before main aerocover installation, SpaceX also added at least a half a dozen small boxes seemingly developed to protect several thin metal probes that penetrate through Super Heavy's tanks and skin and are attached to avionics boxes. Further, while less observable, teams also worked to finish Super Heavy B4's Raptor heat shielding with a large number of similar sheet steel covers and panels. Without official photos from SpaceX or another lift onto the launch mount, it's impossible to know if Booster 4's Raptor heat shield is fully closed out, but the shielding that runs around its circumference appears to be finished. When almost 30 engines are involved, even nominal pre-burner testing will likely produce a massive fireball that could engulf Super Heavy's aft, if not the entire booster, with flames. For static fire testing, Raptors typically make a smaller and faster but still substantial fireball during shutdown, creating another potential source of damage to any sensitive hardware found anywhere on or in Booster 4's thrust section. As such, Super Heavy aerocovers may be just as important for persisting static blazes as they'll be for surviving launches and landings. Number 1. SpaceX Starship Super Heavy Launch Vehicle Program. SpaceX proposes to conduct Starship Super Heavy launch operations from the Boca Chica launch site in Cameron County, Texas. SpaceX must apply for and receive a testing permit or permits and/or a vehicle operator license from the FAA Office of Commercial Space Transportation to conduct the Starship Super Heavy launch vehicle. The proposed action includes test and launch operations, tank tests, nominal operation closures, anomaly response closures, and related infrastructure construction. SpaceX plans to execute its Starship Super Heavy program over the next several years. SpaceX may require many new or modified experimental permits or vehicle operator licenses issued from the FAA in order to execute the program. Thus, the FAA has drafted a Programmatic Environmental Assessment, or PEA, which evaluates the potential environmental impacts of the activities associated with SpaceX's Starship Super Heavy program. A programmatic document is a type of general, broad NEPA review from which subsequent NEPA documents can be tiered, focusing on the issues specific to the subsequent actions. The completion of the environmental review process does not guarantee that the FAA will issue an experimental permit or vehicle operator license to SpaceX for Starship Super Heavy launches at Boca Chica. SpaceX's license application must also meet FAA safety, risk, and financial responsibility requirements per 14 CFR Chapter 3. The FAA cannot issue a decision document, which could include a finding of no significant impact or a decision to initiate an environmental impact statement until all consultations are complete. Do share with us in the comments what are your thoughts about SpaceX missions. Thanks for watching.